and welcome to my craft room. I'm Leo from inkymemories.co.uk. I'm an independent Stampin' Up demonstrator based in South Wales, and today on this workshop Wednesday we're going to be using the Peace and Joy bundle. It is another Christmas project. Like I said, all the projects in December are going to be festive themed, so today we are going to be making a card using this bundle, and we are going to be using a couple of other products with this as well, and I'll go through those as we pull those in. So first things that I want to do, we're going to be doing something a little bit messy. So I'm going to start with the messy stuff because it needs time to dry. So I'm going to pop these out of the way, and I'm actually going to bring in just a second piece of grid paper over the top to protect my work surface. Now what I want to do first of all is cut a mat for the front of the card. And I'm just going to grab my trimmer, and I have some very vanilla cardstock here. And the mat that I want for the front of my card needs to be 12 centimeters by 8.2 centimeters. It's a fairly precise measurement, and I will show you why a little bit later on. So I'm going to cut that first of all. So just pulling my cardstock to the 12 centimeter line on here, and then running the dark grey cutting blade straight through that. I'll spin that around and pop it to 8.2. And again, just pull that through. Okay, so this is the mat that we need for the front of the card, and this is our messy project piece. And like I said, we're going to start with the messy stuff first. So today we're going to be using some embossing paste. Now I have here the Shimmery White Embossing paste specifically, and if I just crack this open so you can see, this is basically a thick paste substance, as the name suggests. Now this one actually has a whole load of glitter in it, so hopefully if I hold this up the camera will focus on this for you so you can see all of the glitter in there, hence shimmery white. And we're going to be using this today with a couple of products. So I have a silicone craft mat. This is very handy for using with embossing paste, and I also have here the basic pattern decorative masks. Now these come as a pack of 4 masks. I just grab these out. So these are fairly thin pre-cut plastic masks. There's quite a few different designs in here. So you've got this sort of nice ornate kind of background pattern. You've got some spots. We also have in here like a series of tree trunks and branches, and then this sort of leaf pattern as well. And the one I'm going to be using today is the spots. So I'm just going to pop these to one side out of the way. And to go along with my embossing paste, I have a set of the palette knives here. These make it incredibly easy to work with the paste. And I'm just going to use this nice long, thin, rounded palette knife today. And the last thing I have then is some Poppy Parade ink. This is one of our re-inkers to use with the embossing paste. Now if you don't have re-inkers, you can still colour your embossing paste. Just take your stamping pad, put a little bit of ink onto the, your craft mat, your silicone craft sheet here. So literally just sponge the ink pad down onto the surface of it, and then put your embossing paste on top and colour it that way. So you don't have to have a re-inker for this, it just makes it a little bit easier. So if I pop my little piece of cardstock just to one side, I'm going to lay my mat over the top. Now the other thing that I will mention that is quite important when you are using embossing paste is that you do want to wash your tools straight away as soon as you've used it. Once the embossing paste dries, it goes very hard, and it is then very hard to actually get off any tools or surfaces that you've used it on. So I actually have just over to the side of me here a tub of water that I can wash all of my tools in as soon as I am done. Okay, let's get messy then. So I'm going to crack open my embossing paste and just take a little scoopful of this. That should be enough, I think. And now all of the tools that I've shown you here, so the embossing paste, the masks, the palette knives and so on, can be found in your annual catalogue, and they're all on page 146, and then your re-inkers are in their colour section. So I've got my pile of embossing paste on my silicone craft sheet here, and taking my re-inker, I'm just going to add 2 fairly generous, let's make it 3 generous drops of ink into there, and then I'm just going to mix this all up using my palette knife. So the ink, as you can see, colours your embossing paste really nicely. just mix this all in, make sure you've got it all nice and evenly mixed. No white parts left. And you should be able to see all of that shimmer in there as well. I'm going to add a little bit more ink just to try and get this to be a bit more red rather than orange. And if you can hear noises in the background, my cats have invaded my craft room today, so I do apologise. The door is open, they are free roaming today. There we go. So again, just mixing that ink in, making sure that we've got our embossing paste all nice and evenly coloured. Once you're happy that it is all nicely coloured, you don't have any white paste left over, and I've actually just noticed I've got a tiny bit on the top. I want to make sure I don't end up with that in my project, so I'll just colour that in as well. Okay, and once you have your paste all nicely coloured, and like I said, if you are doing this with an ink pad, just sponge your ink pad onto your craft mat first, add your embossing paste on top, and then mix it in exactly the same way that I've done here. I'm going to pick some up onto my palette knife, and you now need to practice living out your plastering dreams. So we're literally just going to drag this over the surface of the mask. I apologise for the noise because of the glitter in here. You will hear a kind of crunchy noise as I'm dragging this over. Shouldn't last for too long though. Okay, make sure you get it all the way to the edges. So if you ever have, you know, considered becoming a plasterer, this is a great way to test that out. See if it is the trade for you. Okay, I think I have all of my cardstock covered. I'm just going over the surface, making sure that all of the embossing paste that I've left on the cardstock is nice and flat, and there aren't any sort of huge lumps on there. And then I'm just going to peel off my mask, and I'm going to pop that straight into my tub of water just here on one side. And what I want to do before this dries, I want to lift it out of the sort of bits of embossing paste that are around the edges. I just pop this into here as well. So yeah, just make sure you lift your piece of cardstock out of the edge pieces, because like I say, once it dries it does go very hard and you'll find it difficult to break it away from those edge pieces. And I'm going to put all of this to one side to dry while we move on with the rest of our card. So now that we have the messy part out of the way, it's time to put together the rest of our card pieces. So I'm going to bring back in my trimmer. We still have a little bit more trimming to do. So let me grab in my Very Vanilla. I need to cut a mat for the inside of my card this time. So this one I want to be 9 by 13.5. So let me just cut this at 9 first of all. And then I'll spin that around and cut that at 13.35. So this is just a stepped down size from our card base, which is why it has those slightly odd numbers on there. And then I have a piece of Poppy Parade cardstock. I'm going to cut myself a card base out of this. So I need to do this edge to 14.85, and this is where our odd little 0.05 comes in. That is half a sheet of A4. So there is my card base. I'm going to turn this around and score it at 10.5. So there is our card base and a mat for the inside. And I think that's all I need in terms of trimming. I'm just going to cut a couple of extra pieces. So I have here some vellum. We're going to be doing some die cutting with this shortly. And I just need a small piece for my die cut. So I'm just going to cut a little bit off the edge here. Just like so. And that should be all I need for now. So I can pop my trimmer back to one side. Now, of course, I do also have a Very Vanilla envelope. We're going to be doing some stamping on that. I do need my scrap piece of Poppy Parade as well, and a little piece of Very Vanilla. And then the other things that we're going to be using today are the Brushed Metallics cardstock, which is this gorgeous pack of brushed metallic cardstock, as the name suggests. You've got 3 different colours in here. You've got a gold, a champagne, and then a darker coppery colour. And we're just going to be using the gold piece today. I believe this little piece here should be big enough for what I need. And then the final thing that I am using on the front of this card is a piece of the Forever Gold Specialty Designer Series paper. Now both this and the Brushed Metallic cardstock come in your August to December catalogue, and they can be found on page, let's have a look, so the metallic cardstock is on page 45 and this specialty DSP is on page 152. So now this stuff is absolutely gorgeous. As you can see, it is gold foil and it is pre-cut or laser cut sheets of gold foil. So I've used a couple of these. Let me find another one of these so you can actually see the rest of those pieces. There are 2 types of sheets in this pack. So you've got this one that has these sort of rectangular panels, and then you have this sheet which is full of pre-cut sort of leaf images, and then you've got backgrounds for die cuts or punches that you can put sentiments onto. So you've got a circular one, a hexagonal, and a rectangle as well. You've got this gorgeous wreath piece on here, lots of different sort of foliage flourishes on there that you can use on your card fronts or various other projects. And then, like I said, I have used a couple of those rectangular pieces already. So here is another sheet with the rest of those in there, so you can see the sort of leaf designs, some geometric prints, and so on. So I'm just going to be using one of these rectangular pieces for my card front today. So I shall pop the rest of these over to one side. We don't need those. So I'm going to do a little bit of stamping to get all of that done while we are waiting for our card front to dry. So if I pop this over to one side out of the way, I'm going to be needing my little piece of vanilla scrap and my envelope and the inner mat for my card. And I'm going to grab some stamps from here. Now for the inside and envelope of my card, I'm just going to use this fun little sort of flourish piece. I don't even know what you would call it, like a starburst, I guess. Just to add a little bit of something to the inside of my card and onto the envelope. And I'm going to be stamping this in Poppy Parade to go with our card. So I'm first of all going to stamp the inner mat. I'm just going to pop a couple of these down one side, and I'm just using the ink. I'm inking it just the once and then stamping multiple times to get that sort of variation in the ink, and then I'll do the same going up the other side, like so. And then I'm going to pop a couple of stamps onto the envelope as well. If you've seen any of my previous videos, you know I don't like to leave envelopes naked. I like to make sure they are as dressed up as the cards on the inside. So just a couple of those pieces on the envelope as well. Now the last thing that I want to stamp to go with our major sentiment that we're going to be die cutting, I need a couple of the little words that come in here. So I want to grab the merry and the and. And then we're just going to stamp those in the Poppy Parade ink onto my little scrap piece of very vanilla cardstock here. So nice and simple, light taps onto the ink pad just to get that nicely inked up. And then I'm just going to pop that straight down and straight back up on my cardstock. And then the same with the second sentiment. So again, straight down and straight back up. And that is all of the stamping that we need for our project today. So it's fairly simple in terms of stamping. Not too strenuous. Okay, and now I'm going to move on to a little bit of die cutting, which is going to be the main sort of focal piece on the front of our card. And I'm using the Coordinating Joy dies for this. Now I really like these dies and the way that they work together. So basically for the three major sentiments that we have in the stamp set, so bright, peace and joy, we have the words also in three different sizes of die. So we're going to be using bright as our sentiment today. So I'm going to grab all three versions of bright from my dies and I'll show you how they fit together. So you have this sort of outer piece, this very bubbly just outline. You then have a slightly more detailed die cut here, and this one actually die cuts the stamped word. So if I pop this over the top of the stamped image there, you can see that it will die cut that out. So that's the middle size piece. And then the last piece that you have here is sort of a string word. So again, it still says the bright, but it's a much finer version. And the idea is that you can layer these up together, which is what we're going to be doing today. So with my piece of gold foil, I want to die cut my very thin string word. It looks like that is just going to fit on there, which is perfect. And for this, I'm going to be using some of the adhesive sheets to make it a little bit easier to adhere to my card pieces at the end. So I'm going to grab out a piece of the adhesive and cut a piece that is big enough for my die and cardstock to sit on. So if I hold my die up to my piece of cardstock here, I'm going to grab a pair of long scissors and just trim right up here next to the end of my die. So this piece of cardstock now is perfectly sized for my die. And then I'm going to cut a piece of adhesive that perfectly fits my cardstock. So line this up onto my adhesive sheet, and again just taking my nice long scissors, just going to cut this ready to use. Okay. And then this stuff is incredibly easy to use. You simply peel off the top sheet and stick your cardstock onto it. And then when you run it through your die cutting machine with your die, the adhesive will be on the back for you, ready for it to then stick to your projects. So the larger bubbly piece I'm going to cut from the vellum. So again, sorry, excuse me. Again, I'm going to cut my vellum down so that it's just big enough for the die to sit on the front of, like so. And then the middle piece, the sort of bubbly version of the word, I'm going to cut out of the Poppy Parade cardstock. And I'm just going to, again, trim this down so that it is just big enough for my die. There's a couple of reasons that I do this. Number one, it makes it easier to run through your die cutting machine. If everything is fairly small, it means you can fit multiple pieces in at once. It also means that you can use the rest of your piece of cardstock. I have mentioned previously that when your die cutting plates start to get a little bit scarred, they can transfer those scars onto any cardstock that isn't covered with the die. So for example, if I'd left this as that long strip of gold foil cardstock, if I'd run the whole thing through, the piece that would be left over, or say on this edge, the scars from my cutting plates would transfer onto that and I wouldn't then be able to use the rest of that piece of foil. So now that we have all of our pieces ready to go, it's time to do some die cutting, and I'm very happy to introduce to you today the mini Stampin' Cut and Emboss. I literally just received this yesterday, so this is the first time that I'm going to be using it. And just to give you a little comparison of this compared to its bigger brother, let me just bring that in here. There we go. So you can see there is quite a bit of a size difference between the two. This is perfectly sized though for the lot of our dies. And if you have a look through your annual or August to December or even your January to June catalogue, any set of dies that will work in the mini is noted as such. You'll see there's a little tiny symbol next to it that says mini Stampin' Cut and Emboss, and you'll know that that set of dies will also work with the mini machine if you wanted to invest in that. Okay, it also comes with these teeny tiny and super cute little plates. Now the only ones that we're going to be needing for die cutting today are plate 1 and the 2 clear plate 2. So I'm going to pop those into one side. So I've got one plate 1 and one of the plate 2s, and then arrange my dies onto the cutting surface. So I'm just going to line up my word onto my piece of cardstock, just making sure that it does nicely fit into the edges. Add my second plate 2 on top and hope that it doesn't move my die. There we go. And then I'm just going to feed that into the machine and run it through exactly as I normally would. My die cut pieces are ready to go then, and I'm now going to layer them all up. So I'm going to grab some liquid glue to put together these two pieces first of all. So taking my liquid glue, I just want to put a small amount onto the back of this poppy piece, especially on the thinner areas. We don't want the glue to sort of squeeze out from underneath once I sandwich the two pieces together. So just make sure that you do have glue all the way around, just to hold the two pieces together nicely. If you do have any large pieces of glue, just sort of rub them slightly with the tip of the glue bottle. That will just help stop them from squeezing out of the edges. And then I'm going to add this straight down onto my vellum die cut underneath to start building up our sentiment piece. Hold that in place just for a few moments to allow the glue time to bond. And then I'm going to add my gold piece over the top, and I have another new tool today, my reverse tweezers. I mentioned these recently, that it was something that I was looking to get for my craft room, specifically to help me with tying bows, but they are also going to help with fine die cut. So I've just peeled off the backing layer from my adhesive here, and I'm going to grab this die cut fairly centrally with my tweezers just to help me get this into place over the top of my layered sentiment here. And once you're happy with the positioning, you can then push this down into place, and because we have that adhesive sheet on the back, it just goes on nice and easily. Now I do have the dot for the eye here. I'm going to attempt to get this on to the die cut. Let's see, this is a teeny tiny piece, so this may or may not go well. Who knows? Okay. And that is my cat digging in the Christmas present box, which is currently stored in here. Apologies again for the noise. Right, there we go. My layered die cut is all ready to go. So you can see we've got the vellum behind and that nice piece of Poppy Parade underneath with the gold foil over the top. And that's going to sit really nicely on the front of our card. And it is now time to build our card. So taking the card base, I'm going to fold it along the score line and then burnish that score line just to make sure that it stays nicely folded. I'm going to bring back in then all of my other little pieces that I have here. So first of all, let's pop the inner mat into the card. I'm just going to do this with liquid glue. Just run a thin bead of the glue just around the edge and a little bit across the middle just to hold it into place. And then pop that down onto the inside of your card. And with liquid glue, you do have those few seconds of wiggle room, so if it doesn't land in quite the right place first time, you can always move that around a bit more. I'm then going to cut up my little mini sentiments that I have here. I'm using a particularly long pair of scissors for this. It just helps you to get nice, even, straight cuts. So I just want to trim these down straight around the edges, leaving a tiny bit of the vanilla cardstock around the edge of the stamped image. So Merry. little and from here. So again, by using a longer pair of scissors, you can just do one single cut, which means that it should be a nice straight cut for you all the way around the edge of the word. Just like that. And then it is time to put all of the pieces together. So I'm going to bring back in the piece that we did with embossing paste, which has now dried, and I'm going to grab one of these pieces from my laser gold special paper. I'm going to use this one here, this sort of chevron geometric pattern, and these are held in just with a tiny little bit of paper around the edges, so you literally just need to pull them away from the backing sheet. Okay, so the easiest way that I have found to layer these together is to take your piece of the gold foiled piece and layer it over the top of your embossed piece, just like so. And this is why that piece is such an odd size, that 12 by 8.2, that is the size of this rectangular paper here. I'm going to take then my large sentiment piece, and I want to pop this down with some dimensionals. I'm going to use mini dimensionals for this today, because I want to try and hide them behind the back of the sort of layered section here. Brand new pack of dimensionals, so here we go. Now I am going to use slightly more dimensionals than I normally would, on probably more than you've seen me use on projects previously, just because I want them to really bond well through both layers here. So what I'm doing is using the dimensionals and putting them in place so that they are hidden. So they're not just on the vellum, they are on the coloured cardstock as well, so they don't show through on the front of my card. I swear, my kitten, this is what you can hear, she's found herself what looks like a cotton reel and is rolling it around the floor. What is it they say, never work with children and animals? Okay, last dimensional just going into there. So I have a good spread of dimensionals right the way across the back of my sentiment word there. And now I'm going to peel the backs off all of these. I'm going to put my sentiment right into the center of this piece, and those dimensionals are going to hold both the sentiment to the gold foil, and also they should hold through to your embossed paste piece on the back as well, so it holds the whole thing together. Just give them a good squeeze just to make sure that the glue does go all the way through and holds all of those layers together for you. And I'm also going to put a couple of dimensionals just onto the back of these tiny little sentiment words as well. And again, sticking with the mini dimensionals for this. So just a couple on the back of the Merry. And just one on the back of the and should be plenty. So I'll pop the backs off these. And then it is time to pop these into place on my card front as well. So merry and bright. And I'm just going to add this whole piece to the front of my card using some liquid glue. So again, I'm just going to run this around the edge of the piece of cardstock. Just a nice thin bead of the glue and a little bit across the middle just to hold it into place. And because we have used embossing paste on this piece of vanilla cardstock, it has warped ever so slightly because it's got damp. So using a little bit more liquid glue than perhaps you normally would will help to hold that nice and straight onto your card front. So just hold it in place for a few seconds just to give it time for that glue to catch and bond and hold your layers in place for you. And once you're happy that it is all in place, that is our finished card for today. So a little bit different, something possibly a little bit more unusual for a Christmas card, and super fun using that embossing paste and colouring it to match your card. And you can do that with any colour. So this tub is white in base, and you can also get plain white embossing paste if you don't want to have the one with the glitter in it. And then you can colour it with any of our ink refills, or like I said, just using one of our ink pads, you can colour it that way as well. Now, I couldn't make this card and not make a couple of alternatives. You know how I like to do that. So I have made two others using the other large sentiments that come in the set. So this one here is the peace sentiment, and I've used the tree branches and sort of trunks embossing mask in the background, and another piece of that gold laser cut foil over the top. And then on the inside I've just stamped a little bit of the foliage. And then for this last one I went for slightly less traditional colours. So for this one I've actually used rich raspberry, which is this gorgeous rich purple, works really nicely with the gold. And I use that sort of almost fleur-de-lis type mask in the background, and then that gridded piece over the top, and then the joy sentiment to top it off. So there we go. I hope you have enjoyed this project today. If you have, please do give the video a like. Consider subscribing to my channel so that you don't miss out on any of the other festive projects coming throughout December, and also the new content coming in January as well. If you have any questions or comments about the project or anything to do with Stampin' Up, please do pop them into the comment section below. I'd be happy to help you out. All of the products that I've used today are available through my store with Stampin' Up, and there'll be a link to that in the description box below for you, so you can get your hands on these products and give this project a go for yourself. If you're based in the UK and you don't currently have a Stampin' Up demonstrator and you'd like a copy of our physical catalogues, there will also be a link for that in the description below where you can request those, and I shall get those straight out into the post for you. Thank you again for joining me today, and I hope to see you in my craft room again soon. Bye bye!